Welcome to an hour of HealthMade Radio. HealthMade is a community for natural health seekers where we educate people about common health conditions and share extensive research on the most effective natural health treatments and promote legislation that protects our health freedoms. A core concept belief is in the innate intelligence and healing power of the body, and if properly supported spiritually, emotionally, and nutritionally, it can find its way back to health. HealthMade Radio will bring you information from integrative health experts throughout the world. Check us out at healthmade.co. Health is what you make it. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt, and I will be your host. Today's guest is Dr. Lindsey Berkson. Dr. Berkson began her clinical practice in the late 1970s and her lecture career in training physicians of all modalities at the same time. She's recognized as one of the pioneers of functional medicine. She has taught, written, and researched the role of nutrition in healthcare with an emphasis on digestion, hormones, and female health. Her original book, Healthy Digestion the Natural Way, was used to train physicians by the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, the largest training body of integrative MDs reaching 120 countries. This book was one of the first books to highlight the role of the gut in the body, mind, spirit, and medicine realms. She's respected for connecting the dots of diverse research as well as participating in original research published in peer-reviewed journals. And she's appreciated for combining smart plus heart. Dr. Berkson designed the first natural nutraceutical for menopause, Fem-Estro, and the first line of natural products for physicians to nutritionally support diverse female conditions, Femline by Metagenics. She worked in the first multidisciplinary clinic in the U.S., the Center for Orthomolecular Medicine in Palo Alto in the early 1980s. Her emphasis is the functional approach to healthcare. This focuses on identifying and addressing the root cause of illness as contrasted to the allopathic perspective that often emphasizes medications for symptom management. She's the author of several books, including Safe Hormones, Smart Women, Hormone Deception, and Sexy Brain. Dr. Berkson supports an integrative approach emphasizing collaboration where doctors work together as a team to help the patient get off meds, if possible, that is, and also get well, stay well. Today, it takes a village to keep us well. Dr. Berkson, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show, and I'm so excited to hear what we're going to be chatting about today. You are probably one of the leading experts in regards to hormones, and I know there's so many things, obviously, that hormones do, and people are struggling with it. It impacts how they feel emotionally, impacts their weight, it impacts their skin, it impacts so many different things. Can you give the listeners just a little bit of a feel of when we say hormones, what does that really mean?
So hormones are completely misunderstood. So throw out everything you thought you knew, and your endocrinologist and gynecologist thought they knew about hormones, because we act as though they're only about reproductive or sexy things. And we only should worry about them in middle age or older age, or if we're having pregnancy issues. But our body is run by a physiologic internet system, by emails. One email tells the cell, actually tells the genes of the cell what to do, and that's what keeps you well or not. And hormones deliver most of those emails. So hormones, it turns out, are the backbone of our physiologic internet system, sending signals to diverse biological terrain, not just ovaries and breasts and prostate tissue. We send hormonal signals, especially to your brain, to your vocal cords, to your kidneys. Estrogen helps your kidneys get rid of uric acid so that your kidneys and your heart stay healthy. Estrogen alone in the last few years has been discovered to have about 800 different actions. One of them is to rule epigenetics, which is how you choose to live and how it affects your genes, because we're not a victim of our genes. Did you know hormones are the middleman of your choices you make and how they impact your genes. So we have now a larger job description of hormones. Huge, huge. I have my second gut book, which is more like a textbook, hopefully coming out next year. And I have a huge amount of data in that book on the unappreciated role of hormones in the gut. And we're not talking about hunger hormones, but testosterone, progesterone, the love hormone, oxytocin. So hormones rule. And the reason that aging, a lot of aging occurs, not all of it, is that as we age, our email system freezes up. We send less hormonal emails to our genes, and in essence, our computer starts to freeze up, and that's why hormonal intervention with hormone therapies for men or women is one of the anti-aging tools that many anti-aging societies teach, because it keeps those signals going. But not just your prostate and your breast, nay. Keeps your lungs stronger so you're less susceptible to what they thought were irreversible lung disease. Keeps your vocal cords going so you can still speak in front of a group of people at work and close that deal. Hormones have a lot to do with keeping you who you are and choose to be. One of the places that hormones particularly rule is what I call the physiologic analogy of your soul. It's a little piece of biological cellular real estate in the center of your brain called the hippocampus. It's the seat of the 3 M's, your memories, your motivation, and your sense of self, or what I call your me, M-E, me-ness. It's really kind of who you are. And it has receptors, which are like little satellite dishes, to take emails from estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, oxytocin. And when you have less hormones as you age, if you don't take hormone replacement, that tissue shrinks, actually called hippocampal shrinkage or atrophy, and that is what causes cognitive decline, or some of the cognitive decline diseases like Alzheimer's or Lewy body disease.
So it's almost like
hormones rule your brain.
So it's almost like you lose your me-ness, if the essence of yourself, by when these hormones decline, because the communication then to this hippocampus is obviously is then reduced as the hormones are being reduced as we get older.
Well, that's what frailty is. And we've thought of frailty as inevitable. The longer people say, I'm not getting any younger, right? I'm going to age. I'm getting more frail. But the Department of Psychiatry at the University of McGill in 2008 kind of shook the shoulders of neurology, where they measured with MRIs the size of the hippocampus. And they took people who were in standardized tests showing signs of frailty, where you have more memory issues, you don't walk as well, you're bent over, you walk more slowly, and you speak more slowly, and the things that we think of that a 75-year-old person should do. They saw and identified hippocampal shrinkage, and they gave the women shots of estrogen, and they gave the gents shots of testosterone, and they tracked with functional MRIs the size of the hippocampus, and they were able to show, just like a woman can go in and get her lips blown up with filler, that the hippocampus actually revolumized, and over a very short period of time, 5 to 7 weeks, and along with that, people became less frail according to standardized testing, so that there was reversibility of hippocampal shrinkage with giving exogenous or outside of the body non-man-made hormones, although they were the same molecular structure. They could reverse many of the symptoms of aging. They won a huge award for that, and that should make headlines, I think.
Yeah, that is just incredible. I want to hear more about that. We're just going to take a quick little break for commercials. You're listening to HealthMade Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt, and I'm here today with Dr. Lindsey Berkson. Welcome back to HealthMade Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. We're here talking about hormones and how you can stay young forever. And actually, you can right, forever, if we supply those hormones properly and we keep that hippocampus going. So my question is, though, there are a lot of people are saying, well, the biological clock is that we're supposed to just naturally get older. What do you say to them?
That's a really good question, because that is the naysayers. And they go, well, if nature intended me to have hormones when I was older, we would have them. But you could counteract that with so many different analogies. You're losing your eyesight. You wear glasses. That's technological intervention. You get older and your lenses get cloudy. You get cataracts. So you get new lenses. That's technology helping you see better longer, even though nature was getting you to have more cloudy vision. Mm-hmm. It goes on and on. So what this is better living through chemistry. And you have the opportunity to use technology. When I worked at the Wiseman family practice, Dr. Richard Wiseman, who just retired after about 58 years of practice, we'd have these conversations at the water fountain. And he's in his mid-70s, maybe his late 70s, and he runs several Ironmen a year, and he still looks really hot in shorts. He's a hunk. And he would say to me, and I never forgot this conversation, he would say, if you had 100 people in a room, and everybody got the memo that they should exercise and eat well, but half of the people were on individualized, tested and treated, because everyone has their own hormonal footprint, and one size does not fit all with hormones. And not everybody needs hormones. Some people, even though they get into their 80s, still make some, but they're atypical. He would say half of the people were on hormones, balanced, individualized, you could cherry pick them out. They'd stand taller. Their skin would be shinier and thicker. They would have more of a robust voice, because hormones rule your biological real estate. And if you choose to be on hormones, you do slow down the aging process. And if they're done right, you can even slow down your risk of cancers, because hormones, and I write about this in Sexy Brain, have a lot to do with protecting us against cancer and death of cancer. And we've come to think of them from the Women's Health Initiative and other research as causing cancer. It's actually an imbalance of hormones that puts you more at risk, not balancing them. So I love that conversation of what he said. And he and his wife, who have been on hormones for years, just are defying aging. And people often say that to myself. And I had breast cancer 25 years ago and have been on hormones for 17 years, which goes against what most allopathic doctors would recommend. But I wouldn't be me and talking like I am, lecturing, writing, without those hormones watching my physiologic back.
Because, the first thing you say, a gentleman dealing with prostate cancer or a female dealing with estrogen or progesterone positive type of cancer, then the first thing they do is put them on some kind of a blocker, hormone blocker. So you feel that is incorrect then?
Well, everything is very individualized. But just because you're on a hormone blocker for estrogen doesn't mean you can't be on other hormones. So at the Wiseman Clinic with our oncologist in Austin, Texas, if a woman is on an aromatase inhibitor or tamoxifen, we can now give her testosterone pellets or testosterone topically or mucosally, which is in the vagina, rubbed in the labia or up into the vaginal vault. And she's still getting the benefit, but she's on blockers, so she's not getting the estrogen. But she's still getting the testosterone signaling her hippocampus and other real estate in her body that doesn't make her feel so miserable. Yeah. So there are ways to get around it safely, but they're not in the mainstream, and most doctors don't know it. So even at the anti-aging conferences, they'll say if a woman's had hormonally driven cancer, she could never be on hormone replacement. And that's changing, but it's changing slowly. And unfortunately, a lot of women really get aged and lose who they were because hormones keep you who you are. So it's a battle. If you can't do it, though, with your own doc's blessing, there are ways to use foods and herbs and nutrients and so forth, but everything has to be individualized. But often you can have some hormone, but your gynecologist or oncologist might not know about these methodologies.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, they just do it their standard of care, which is a chemical neutering of the patient in a way. Why do you, I mean, these hormones that you say, they regulate pretty much every function in the body, like you're mentioning. How is it that we are so struggling with a healthy hormonal system nowadays?
We're seeing hormonal issues in younger and younger people. So I was a hormone scholar at an environmental estrogen think tank at Tulane University in med school with the scientists who discovered the field of hormone-altering chemicals. And I also had the honor of working with the scientists who discovered the first and the second estrogen receptor, which is a very big deal, but we kind of learned then how hormones work. So we live in a dirty planet with dirty food and dirty air. Air is the new food because it's 24/7. And much of the contaminants, much of the everyday pollutants, even that you get in the shower in the morning or with personal care products, just as an example, or plastic shrunk cheese and food, actually create hormone imbalance. In fact, Harvard and the Huffington Post put on a forum January 31st in 2017. You can Google it online, called Hormone-Altering Chemicals by Harvard and the Huffington Post. And a bunch of the people I worked with at Tulane are on that panel. And they were saying that there's 3 threats to humanity. The first, of course, is nuclear war. The second, depending on who you vote for, is global warming. And the third are hormone-altering chemicals, because hormones are now known to rule everything, and we have chemicals that are fighting our hormones to do their job right. And they're in the egg and the sperm, in the placenta, they're in our bodies before we're even a fetus developing, and they're altering pregnancy health. 1 out of every 4 pregnancies is having severe complications, which doesn't bode well for the future health of the mom or the baby. It's altering milestones of reproduction, when girls start menstruating and when we stop menstruating. And when you alter of a race, species, the milestones of reproduction, which are real biologically hardwired, you start with everything. So we're seeing in young teenage girls polycystic ovarian syndrome, an epidemic that's kind of like menopause in teenage girls. We're seeing POTS, dysautonomia, because a lot of these chemicals attack the nervous system. We are seeing a well-documented and replicated set of data to show that not all, but many young men have a low testosterone epidemic, so that it's not uncommon today in my practice to see young men in their early 20s having testosterone levels that once used to be thought only to be found in 70-year-old andropausal or menopausal men. So the rules of life have changed, and hormones are getting out of balance earlier and earlier and in the womb. And as we know now from the work of a lot of the scientists I got to interview for my book, Hormone Deception, like Bruce Blumberg at UC Irvine, these abnormal issues with our hormones are transgenerational. They're passed on 4 generations down with just the first exposure. So we're in trouble as a race because our hormones rule us and our hormones are getting futzed with. So detox is going to have to move mainstream, and people who understand to look at redefining hormones, not just the old textbook way, but look at them now in light of the bigger picture and our food and environment and planetary atmosphere. This is the new way of looking at hormones, but it hasn't yet been taught in med schools like this yet, which is why I love to go on shows like this. Thank you so much. That pleasure. People get to have a little bit of a perspective, elbow boost, so you can start to see what's going on here and then choose to take action.
That's when we come right back, because I want to talk a little bit more about the detoxification, because I have number of patients, they've taken some milk thistle for a month and they feel that they're detoxified. But I want to come back to that subject after this quick break. Welcome back to HealthMade Radio. This is Dr. Michael Karlfeldt, and we are talking about how to revitalize your body through healthy hormones. Dr. Berkson, you're talking about detoxification and why detoxification is becoming so important for staying healthy for a longer period of time and optimizing your hormones. So what does detoxification mean, and what does that look like?
Well, there's many ways to detoxify, but it basically means getting the bad stuff out of us. And the bad stuff are plastics, volatile organic pollutants, DDT, flame retardants, nonstick cookware, and all of these chemicals, they store in our fat cells. They're lipophilic. They love fat. In fact, they make your fat cells nasty. So the fat cells in 2018 are much harder to get rid of than fat cells were in 1980s, because all of these chemicals act as what Dr. Blumberg calls obesogens that make your fat cells nasty. So part of dieting these days has to be detoxing. My gang at Tulane, along with Harvard, did a study last year where they had a bunch of women lose weight, and then they monitored who gained the most weight back and who yo-yoed the worst, and they measured the amount of pollutants in their blood. And women who had the highest level, especially of nonstick cookware and flame retardant pollutants, which you can get quite a bit in fish these days, in the meat of fish, it's just all of our food's so polluted, they just couldn't keep the weight off, because even if you fast, your fat cells now don't act normally and don't respond to caloric restriction like they used to. So the way to be healthy really today is to have some kind of mindfulness about having less exposure. So what are the ways you shop, you purchase, you keep your home, because your home is where most of your exposure is at, and in the car and office. And in my book, Hormone Deception, the last third of the book, I give a tour of the supermarket cart, your office, and your home to give you ideas of how to reduce exposure. And then the second way is we can't totally reduce exposure because the planet's so dirty. We can't live in a Seinfeldian bubble like the Bubble Boy routine with Jerry Seinfeld. So we have to start doing detox, sometimes in heavier manners, sometimes in lighter, sometimes as part of a regular part of our life. So there's all kinds of levels of detox. If you go to the gym and you work out several times a week and sweat really hard, that's a form of detox. If you take modified citrus pectin every day, it helps pull some heavy metals, which are also hormone-altering chemicals. Heavy metals act a lot like very strong synthetic estrogens, or can act like that. So there's things nutraceuticals you can take, and then there's detoxes where you can do a few days here with a certain protocol. In my book, Sexy Brain, I give a 10-day hormone receptor detox, and you can do the 10 days, or you can just do that same detox for 2-3 days once a month or a few times a year. But detox has to move mainstream, because these are the things that really start to cause what I describe as molecules of mass destruction.
Yeah.
They start putting us, and we are now seeing that we have very unhealthy kids, and the kids today are going to have less long lives than their parents. So we're in a backward spiral of we spend more money than any other country of our gross national product on healthcare, and we're very ill. There was an article that came out in Natural Affairs a few months ago looking at birth mortality and mother mortality at birth, comparing 19 wealthy nations, and we were at the bottom, at the total bottom.
That's just atrocious. Absolutely.
So detox is a big part, and you can detox in many different ways, even if you just started taking modified citrus pectin and get yourself to get red in the face twice a week at the gym. But as a gift for your guests, I have this slideshow on the need for green pregnancies and detox. I spent about a year putting that together, It's very in-depth and professionally done. And I'm going to make that a gift for free for your listeners, which will share a lot of details with you in this slideshow.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, for all the listeners, it will be made available, where this interview is at on healthmade.co. So thank you so much, Dr. Berkson, for that gift. That's tremendous. Yeah, because it's becoming, like you're saying, is that children are born with these hormone-altering chemicals, and so their hormonal systems are already dysfunctional when it's coming out of the womb. So it just shows the importance of how crucial it is at any stage in your life to do this detoxification, to move these chemicals out because of their impact on your genetic material and your epigenetic material, because they will then create who you are and create your attitude, your energy. And another interesting point that you made, many interesting points, but people that are struggling with losing weight, gaining weight, and they've been on every possible diet out there, and you're mentioning that the people that are more toxic are the ones that gain back the weight faster. So it's a
nightmare. It's very hard to get rid of weight these days. And the older and older you get, one, it's that hormones help keep your weight more balanced, and you have less hormones with older age. But secondly, you've been on the planet longer. So you've had time to accumulate and sequester more toxic chemicals. I think that I prophesize that this will become very clear that to save humanity, we're going to have to do this. And in about 20 years, we're going to have insurance reimbursed detox centers. And it's going to reclaim the nuclear family, because you're going to want to pick out your mate, and together before you conceive, which is the ideal way, if you don't conceive by mistake, pick out somebody and detox together first. So because the egg and the sperm are so highly filled with fat that a lot of these chemicals store in the egg and the sperm, and also in the placenta, and then the mother's milk. In fact, the mother downloads 80% of her exposure to these chemicals in mother's milk to the baby in the first year of breastfeeding. Doesn't mean breast milk is bad, but it means that if she could detox herself prior to breastfeeding, it would be much better for her baby's brain and nervous system and IQ, because all of these things affect IQ and behavior. So I actually interviewed on my radio show, Dr. Berkson's Best Health Radio, a Sorbonne scientist who wrote a book called Toxic Cocktail, which is how the thyroid is one of the organs that's first hit by all these chemicals, and it particularly, if the parents are toxic, hits the baby's thyroid, which affects the baby's IQ and brain and cognitive function. So if you could pick out your mate, decide who you want as your co-parent and your spouse, and together detox prior to conception, your baby has a much better chance, no guarantee, but a much better chance at a better life, and not having so many of the issues that we see in children today, which I feel are largely due to the toxic environment that we live in. So I think it's going to bring back the nuclear family, which is now kind of up for grabs. And
I agree.
Because we're going to want our kids to be safe,
Yeah, and that becomes, those are huge points. That's what I always tell my patients. If I can get a hold of a mother and father before they decide to have, or a future mother and father before they're having children, and we can work on them. I can work on them while they're pregnant. I can work on them after pregnant, so that all these chemicals and toxins don't move through the placenta into the fetus, nor you minimize the amount of toxins going through the mother's milk to the child. I mean, then I'm thrilled to bits. I mean, that is my dream.
Good for you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the wave of the future, and you're doing the future now. But we need more docs like you, and we need people to understand that they can take more control of the legacy of their family, but they've got to be smart and strategic, because the world is dirty, and it's a realistic, it's here. It's the isness of a toxic planet is here right now, but you can take action. And good for you boy, are they lucky in Idaho to have you. Huh?
Well, I'm glad there are people like yourself. You have a number of people that I've interviewed, like Dr. Pizzorno, the toxic solution. It is just, you just need that information out there so people recognize the chemical soup that we are swimming in every day, and that alters our isness, who we are. Like you're saying, these hormones, they're the ones that stimulate then the hippocampus, which is the me-ness. And if we alter all of that with all these pharmaceutical chemicals, we are losing who we are as a self, but then also we're losing who we are as a race and as humanity, and we become something else.
I think, of course, it's multifactorial, and we have media and we have consumership, and, there's lots of things. But I do think that this plethora and epidemic of angry kids with short attention spans, and I know we have screens and phones and things, but if you read the literature and you look at what happens to animals exposed in the womb to these hormone-altering chemicals, the animals come out like that. And it is contributing to a cultural angst and an unhealthy culture. But we can do things. We can do things in our home, and we can do things prior to conception, and we can do things in our everyday life that do make a difference, because if we wait for regulatory action, that's going to take decades. So it's great to have shows like this where you can get a few pearls and ideas of what you might do to protect yourself and your loved ones. And you can start doing one thing a month so it's not overwhelming and doomsday, but just kind of taking charge of your life, because this is how the planet is today.
Exactly. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and next segment I want to talk a little bit more about what to do for anti-aging. What are the exact steps that you would suggest an individual would do to slow down the clock of time? You're listening to HealthMade Radio. I am here with Dr. Berkson. You're listening to HealthMade and Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. Welcome back to HealthMade Radio. We're talking here about optimum anti-aging using, through maximizing our hormonal system with Dr. Berkson. So, Dr. Berkson, how can we? What kind of steps do we need to take in order to increase our anti-aging? We all want to look young. We all want to be coherent. Obviously, we want to stay away from dementia, Alzheimer's, and our cognitive skills. We want to maximize that. We want to be able to be sexually active. We want to be able to be athletic. There's all these different things that we want to be even as we are getting older. So what are kind of the step-by-step? We talked about detoxification, but how do you monitor these hormones? I know you can do some blood tests, but what kind of blood tests should an individual run?
Well, I write all the tests I think you should get in Sexy Brain, because there's a lot of them. And when you go to see your gynecologist or your GP and you say, get my hormones tested, they do very minimalistic testing. And but first of all, I just want to make a statement. There's so much bias in this country about people who are older. There's so much bias against aging women. It's crazy. And we all are wanting to live younger, longer. And I think part of it is maybe becoming at an older age that which is still filled with life and not taking the cultural diminished value. So I think part of it's very hard to age in this society that worships youth. So you have to figure out a way to not buy into these ages, 60, 70, 80. If you hit those milestones, those decades, and you let that age dictate how you feel, I'm not getting any younger anymore, and you buy that crap, you own that, you identify with being older. So part of aging, which isn't for sissies, it can be tough, because we're all going to hit diagnoses, is learning how to really figure out how to be well and robust and what I call vitamin R, resilient, so you don't buy into the cultural diminishment of being older. I think that's part of having a better older age, because I'm older now myself, and I know what it feels like to hit these age levels. And I think that you have to really resist cultural bias of youth.
I agree.
And I think it's huge. It's huge. Absolutely huge. I was getting my nails done the other day, and this young lady was next to me, and I've heard this a lot, in fact, but she said, I'm hitting 40, my life's older, I'm so old, 40 is just hitting your stride. It used to be you gave people black party favors when they hit 40. Now, 40s, you're just beginning. But you can be that way at 70, but you can't let those numbers, and you can't let men looking you more invisibly, not wanting to open doors, and people dismissing you. Your identity has to come from within. And I battle this myself, so I think this is a huge thing of staying younger longer.
I agree.
Maybe I can do that more because I'm on hormones.
Well, I mean, it's that mental attitude that you're mentioning. You're thinking, well, at 60, I'm supposed to get this ache and pain, and then we start to talk about that ache and pain, and this becomes who we are instead of
right. We identify with our illnesses, and we just go from doctor to doctor, and that's what happens. You retire and you go downhill, and so you have to battle that, but you have to plan for it. You have to plan for your 60s, plan for your 70s, like you're training for a marathon, and to say, I'm not going to let that happen to me, and I'm going to figure out the steps like listening to your show, what I could do to hopefully have more chance, because there's no guarantees, to have a better 60, 70, and 80-year-old decade. I do believe that hormone health has a lot to do with it, but hormones lean on nutrients. So I like to look at red blood cell levels of nutrients, and nutrients depend on digestion. And as you age, you often tend to digest less well, and your biome has been around. All the microbial life that lives in nooks and crannies throughout you has been around now on the planet for a number of decades. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on that you want to tend to. So when you say hormones, it's not just a blood test or a saliva test or a urine test. There's a bigger picture of hormones. For a hormone to go into that satellite dish called the receptor, that's where your menu choices and your digestive capabilities work. So your magnesium, your zinc, your B vitamins, they all allow the hormone to go in and deliver that email to the gene. But you have to be eating food with colorful choices and healthy choices, and then you have to be digesting it, because if your microbiome isn't that well, or you're exposed to chemicals, Roundup, inorganic food, you might not digest those precious nutrients that you need, even if you're making good food choices. So there's this bigger tapestry of hormones that people don't appreciate, and they don't teach that to gynecologists and endocrinologists. I have a course online. It's a 30-hour course, which a lot of physicians have taken, and some smart patients. It's called Redefining Hormones in Today's Toxic World. And I explain this bigger picture. So when we say, do you want to test your hormones? Well, that means you have to test your digestion and your minerals and your nutrients. And they go, why didn't anybody ever teach us this in med school?
No.
And for some reason, we make things into smaller and smaller compartmentalized pieces rather than the bigger picture of the whole body.
Yes,
so you have to look at the body that owns the hormones.
Yeah, exactly. You gotta look through the whole pathway. I mean, the hormonal and the hormones that are produced are obviously just kind of a end station, and then they go out and deliver their signal. But they need to be able to land somewhere, like the receptor sites that you were talking about. So how healthy are those receptor sites?
Right. Hormones are all about receptor functionality. That is where the rubber meets the road. And you never hear, if you go get your hormones tested in your blood, it doesn't mean that your receptors have functionality. So there's just this. And then also your life, sitting is now shown to make your hormones go kaflooey. So sitting is the new smoking for hormones. And if you sit, the Women's Health Initiative observational trial showed that if women sat more than 5 hours a day, their estrogen started to be in a pro-breast cancer pattern. So, everything we do, whether we work out, if you're a gent, you don't want to take hormone replacement, but you kick butt at the gym, I hope I can say that word, a few times a week, you make more testosterone just by working out. Or if you hug a lot of people that hug and make love make more testosterone and oxytocin. So our life, our communal behavior and interaction and connection, which is what I go into a lot in Sexy Brain, I give a theory of why nature created connection, which was to release hormones to protect the brain. but with our dirty planet, connection and the benefits of connection are being altered. So I call that environmental castration. So I give an understanding of this bigger picture of intimacy and human connection and what it does to our hormones in our brain, and then how we can protect ourselves. So I think nature wants us to release these hormones, and nature never realized we would have a planet filled with chemicals that would want to block them.
Exactly. So, and I mean, it is interesting. Everything we're doing in today's society, out of convenience, we have all this technology which tends to isolate us from human interaction. We interact then through a digital screen, so that reduces then the production of all these different hormones that are life-giving. And in addition to that, we're eating less nutrient-based food, and we are exposing ourselves to chemicals. So we're not able to make the hormones that we're needing to make because we don't have the nutrients. And we have then the chemicals that we're swimming around us that are then confusing our whole system, confusing the whole hormonal system. So, the measuring, the top endocrine system, like the hypothalamus and pituitary, they really don't know what's floating around in the blood because there's so much that looks like estrogen, so much that looks like progesterone. So they really don't know what to create. So it's a little bit of a disaster that we have, and we really need, like you're saying, it's a step-by-step process that we need to go through. We need to look at it methodically rather than just smearing a hormone onto the skin, which can be helpful, but there's more to it.
Yeah, when you first hear about all of this, it's very overwhelming. In fact, when I published one of the very first books on endocrine disruption and what it does to us, which is a great primer for anybody to understand all this, called Hormone Deception, and I published that 20 years ago, which is why I got invited, based on that book, to be a hormone scholar at that think tank. No one wanted to hear about it. It was too doomsday. Now everybody knows about plastics and pesticides and endocrine disruptors. It's entered into the psychobabble of our culture, and we're starting to slowly take cultural action, and we're going to be doing slowly the same thing with our hormones and our health. We'll figure this out.
Yeah,
there's hope. We can remediate the planet. We've done it before. We can remediate our bodies, but if you can just protect yourself from overwhelm and think of one or two things a month to just put your toe in the water to do and improve yourself, and then read books like mine or listen to shows like yours, over time we will, as a race, we're so smart and so many good things are coming out as well as bad things. I think we will get a handle on this, but awareness gives you the power to make the first steps toward fixing it.
I fully agree. We actually, I always hate this part of the show when it ends.
Oh, boo.
I know. Big boo. Thank you so much.
You're such a good interviewer. You ask really good questions, Dr. Michael. You really do. Because sometimes I'm on a show and people ask a question and it's just out of left field. You really move it along well. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I so appreciate having you on the show. And I really urge all the listeners to go onto the website, healthmade.co, to see what kind of gift that Dr. Berkson is giving you. I'm really excited about that. Thank you so much. That's all for today. And make sure to check us out at healthmade.co.